So we are going to wrap up this very short series that we're calling Trapped. And today's message is building financial courage. Before we get started, just bow your heads briefly with mine and let's pray together. Father, we are so incredibly grateful for who you are, for all that you do in our life, for how you're working in this church and through this family. We want to pray for Josh, especially right now, that you will continue to keep your hand upon him, guide his life, bless his future, and continue to use him in powerful ways in the lives of people, making a difference. I pray now, God, as we gather around your word, that you're just going to have complete freedom in our time together to speak to us where we are with exactly what we're needing. We're asking this in Jesus' name. Amen. So there's this really well-known Christian financial planner. His name's Ron Blue. And he says there's only 5 things you and I can do with our money. Pay taxes, spend it, repay debt, save, invest it, or you can give it. Just those 5 things. That's what you do with your money. That's what I do with my money. Really, the only difference between us is the order in which we do those things. But it is the order that makes all the difference. You see, the order that we do those things in speaks volumes about what our priorities are, as well as what's really most important to you. So the vast majority of people in this world, here's what the order looks like. In terms of their priorities, once they get their money, the very first thing they do is they pay debt or taxes. They're the bills, their electric, their gas, their mortgage, their credit cards, their car payments. They pay bills. Next thing they do is they spend money on themselves, on groceries, on shopping, on eating out. If there's anything left after that, they might save a little bit or invest a little bit. And if, and only if, there's anything left after doing all those other things, they give last. That's the majority of people who exist in this world. That's their value system. That's how they relate to money, which shows us that they're first and foremost committed to the kingdom of thingdom. They're really committed to themselves. Now, if you look at the statistics that we know, about 25%, 1 in 4 people never give a dime to charity. According to George Gallup, this past year in 2020, we discovered that the wealthiest people in America give the smallest percentage of their income, and the poorest people in America actually give away the largest percentage of their income. But Christ followers, when it comes to their priorities, you can look at the world, you see what the world does. What we do is we take what is last in the eyes of the world and we put it first. We give first. We give before we spend. We give before we pay our bills. We give before we invest. Why? Because we know it's not ours anyway. It all belongs to God, so he deserves the best and right off the top. So that's where I want to begin, with a simple question today. And the question is, who or what gets first place in your life? Now, I'd love to win, don't you? I mean, whether I'm playing cards with my girls or a game with my grandchildren, or I'm watching a team that I'm rooting for, whether it's the Cowboys or the Rangers or the Stars, we all love it when our team wins. It's great to be first. But beyond sports, we have a lot of other firsts in our life. We have first birthdays, we have first anniversaries, first jobs, first paychecks. Can you remember what you did with your very first paycheck? I can. I was only 14 years old. I took a job at the Putt-Putt Golf about half a mile from my house. And I would go there and I would work evenings and I'd run their counter and I'd help give people their golf clubs and their golf balls to go out and play the course. Well, my first paycheck was $100. And I can remember that money was burning a hole in my pocket. And I asked my mom and dad to take me to the store. I didn't have anything in mind that I wanted to buy. I just knew when I saw it, I would know it and I would buy it. And what I bought with my $100 paycheck were 2 walkie-talkies. Why on earth I bought walkie-talkies, I have no idea. Because it wasn't like, my friends were saying, hey, it'd be really cool if we could run around town with walkie-talkies. I bought these things because I had the money to buy these things. It was what I wanted. I spent my money on walkie-talkies that I never used. That's what I did. Do you remember your first car? Mine was a 1967 VW Bug. I paid $400 for it. Now, it looks like the VW Bug that you see on the screens right now, but mine was not as fancy as that. Mine was red and it was faded. It was a stick shift, had a ton of rust. This was Ohio after all. In fact, I drove it for some time. I sold it to my uncle. One of the first things he did was step on the running boards on the side of the Volkswagen, and they fell off to the ground because they were just rusted through and through. And he said, "Why didn't you tell me they were rusted?" And I said, "Well, I never stepped on them." So my car was a piece of junk, but it was my piece of junk. First things tend to mean a lot to us. We remember the first, we celebrate the first. We have a lot of memories around our first things. And since we're still kind of at the first of the year, a lot of us are still contemplating about what the balance of the year is going to look like, where our lives are headed. You know, I know this, and I wonder really in this coming year, who or what is going to get first place in your life? Because first place is about priorities. It is about what's most important. It's about what consistently gets moved to the front of the line in your life, what captures the most of your time, your energy, your thoughts, and your resources. Now, before we can talk about what we say is the number one priority of our life, let me tell you something I know about me. Sometimes what I tell other people is first place in my life is not really first place. Now, I'm not intentionally lying to people. If anybody's being lied to, it's myself. I kid myself often about what really is first place because I know what the right thing to say is, and so do you. But it's not what I say, but how I live that really defines what's most important to me. For example, let's say a businessman or a businesswoman says, family is my top priority, my highest priority, the number one thing in my life. Yet when you look at their life, they're full-blown workaholics. They spend practically every waking minute at work. And when they're home, they're not really home. Instead, they're often on the phone or on the computer doing work-related stuff. But they say, family's my most important thing. Let me ask you, what do you believe? Their words or their behavior? Or let's say you're in a dating relationship and this person that you're with says, you're their number one. You're their ultimate priority. You're the most important and special thing in their life. Yet you never go on dates. They've never bought you anything, big or small, for a birthday or a special occasion. They don't write you notes. If you call them, that's one thing, but they will never call you. They'll never initiate that move. And when you're at parties, they talk and they flirt with everybody else but you. But they say you're number one. What do you believe? Their words or their behavior? The truth is, behaviors don't lie. How I spend my time, how I spend my money, in what ways I invest my energy, that tells you what's really most important to me, regardless of the things I say, because it's not what I say. It's how I live that demonstrates and defines what's most important to me. Does that make sense? I'll give you another example. This is a true story. A very successful businessman. He owns over 100 cable outlets across the U.S. He happens to be a Christian, a very generous one at that. He gives to all kinds of Christian causes as well as his local church. He was once asked, how did he come to this decision to be so generous? And the man said, it really wasn't a Christian. It was a non-Christian who caused me to come to this decision. And he explained. He said, years ago, I was out with the world-famous business consultant, Michael Cammey. Now, Michael Cammey is the guy who was the genius behind the success of companies like IBM and Xerox. They were together, and they were planning this businessman's life. And what Cammey did was take out a piece of paper, and he drew on that piece of paper a box. And then he said this, Bob, I hear two things coming out of your mouth. And on the paper, what he drew was a dollar sign representing money and a cross representing Christ. He said, I can't tell you how to plan your life until you first tell me which of those two things you want at the center of your box. You tell me which one, we can plan your life. Now, what Cammey was saying is exactly what I'm saying right now. You and I must decide who or what goes into the center of our box. What captures the center of your orbit? Who or what is getting top billing in your life? Because only one thing will get first place. Everything else is going to get less of me. So what's it going to be? And before you and I answer that question, understand, there already is something at the center of that box. And it's not necessarily what you tell other people. It's what your expenditures say is number one. It's evident in your daily schedule. It's where and how you're spending your time. Whatever is getting the best of you, that's your number one priority. Now, in church, I face this a lot. Most Christians do know the answer to this question. We know God and only God deserves top billing in our life. We even back up that statement with a lot of Bible verses. But honesty makes me examine my life and ask the question, I know that's what I say, but do my choices back that up? Nothing is as important as God. Not your dreams, not your career, not even your family. Nothing is as important as God. In fact, when God called his people out of Egyptian bondage and he gave them the laws that would govern them as a nation, the very first law that he puts on the books is this one. I'm the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Notice this command doesn't say you shall believe in God. Why? Because to say that isn't necessary. Everybody has a God. Even atheists have a God. The God may be themselves, it might be pleasure, it might be their wallet, but every human being has a God they worship. Webster's dictionary defines a God in this way: anything which is made the object of excessive devotion. In other words, your God is what your life revolves around. Your God is whatever's getting first place. Whatever's most important is your God. Doesn't matter if you're a believer or not, you have a God and your life is centered on it. So it is not my words, it's my behavior that underscores what's most important to me. What specifically is God looking for to determine whether or not our behaviors match up with our words that say that he is truly number one? Well, from Genesis to Revelation, there is a theme that we see, and it's this truth: the first fruits belong to God. First fruits are a pretty big deal in the Bible. They're mentioned 32 times. Let me give you some examples. In Exodus 23, bring the best of the first fruits of your soil to the house of the Lord your God. In Numbers 18, verse 12, I give you all the finest olive oil and all the finest new wine and grain they give the Lord as the first fruits of their harvest. Now get this, whether it's a lean crop or a bumper crop, God told his people that the first part of every harvest belonged to him. But the first fruit went beyond grain. It even applied to animals and humans. Notice this: consecrate to me every firstborn male. The first offspring of every womb among the Israelites belongs to me, whether man or animal. You know, there's two Old Testament prophetic books. These are minor prophets that both have this message of God getting the first and the best. The two books are Malachi and Haggai. We're a little more familiar with Malachi because Malachi is the book that contains the promise that if we tithe, God opens up the storehouses of heaven and pours blessings into our life. We're less familiar with Haggai, so I want to tell you a little bit about his story. The book of Haggai is the second shortest book in the Bible. The shortest one's actually Obadiah. So this book of Haggai in the Old Testament, it has a pure and simple message: put first things first. It's written to the people of God, to people who say God is first place, but actually demonstrate a different truth with their life. Does that sound familiar? So get this. Haggai spoke to Jews who were returning to Jerusalem after being exiled in Babylon. What you need to understand about this story is more than 70 years prior, Babylon had come in and destroyed the city of Jerusalem and destroyed Solomon's temple completely. When the Jews begin to return from exile, they have their work cut out for them because the city is in ruin, but there is no temple. So the first returnees, they begin to work at rebuilding the temple, but they're opposed, and pretty soon they give up on the work completely. As the years pass, slowly but surely, Jerusalem begins to come back to life. Homes are rebuilt, businesses are reestablished, commerce is established, you have crops being planted, you have the harvest coming in, and life is pretty much returned to normal. And the Jews that are living in Jerusalem have adjusted to the reality of life without the temple. But the foundation of God's house has become overgrown with weeds. It's an embarrassment to God. So Haggai, his message is blunt. He pulls no punches, and he challenges the people in their selfishness. Listen to this. Then the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai. Is it a time for yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house, referring to God's house, remains a ruin? Now, paneled houses could also be translated covered or roofed, but the point is it represents the finishing touches on their personal homes. In other words, their homes are no longer in process. There's not weeds growing around their foundation. Life for them is secure, and they've made sure it's so, but the house of God is still in ruins. Now, please understand, there's nothing wrong with having a nice home. What's wrong is to have a nice home while the work of God suffers. What's wrong is to spend all of our time and money and energy and resources on ourselves and neglect the things of God. This is an indictment. The book of Haggai is an indictment on misplaced authorities. So here's the question I want to ask. Why do first fruits matter so much to God? Well, the first reason is because they're an acknowledgement of God's ownership. You know, one of the first words a child learns is no, followed shortly after by the word mine. Now, I am not a child psychologist by any stretch of the imagination, but I believe there's something about the power of possession that is deeply seated in the human spirit. We want things, we see things, we want things. We want to make them our own, but the truth is none of the things we have are truly our own. Listen to this observation. It is brilliant. It's by Dr. Wendy Mogul. She said in Hebrew, as in Jewish thought, there is no verb for possession. The expression we translate to have, yeshli, actually means it is there to me, or there is for me, or there is available to me. In other words, in the Jewish way of thinking, there is no such thing as personal possession. Nothing belongs to us. Everything belongs to God and is on loan to us. But he retains ownership of all things. So he entrusts these things to us to make wise decisions about them, but we are stewards. And stewards, by definition, are not owners. We just manage. How different would it be if we stopped using the phrase, I have, and instead began to say, God has made available to me. God has made available to me my house, my apartment. God has made available to me my car. God has made available to me this paycheck. The giving of first fruit is a reminder to us that everything belongs to God. It doesn't matter if the yield from the crops is large or small. It doesn't matter if the paycheck is big or small. Once the first fruits are given, no one can say, well, I've given God his part, now the rest is mine. The first fruits are a reminder that it all belongs to God. Everything is on loan. If he wants it back, he can take it back. If he wants someone else to have it, he can give it to someone else. That's his business because it's his stuff. And so this idea of God's ownership of all things permeates the pages of the Bible. Give you some examples. Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord and everything in it. All of it. And all who live in it. Or how about this from the book of Haggai 2:8. The silver is mine and the gold is mine, declares the Lord Almighty. Or in the New Testament, you are not your own. You were bought with a price. Everything I am and everything I have belongs to the Lord. He created it. He made it possible for me to enjoy it by loaning it to me. Now, this is a shift in thinking that a lot of us need to make, that God is the rightful owner of all things, regardless of whether I acknowledge that truth. Paying him first reorients my life to this truth. Every time I'm paid, I pay him first. Why? Because I'm the one that needs to be reminded that it is not mine. 100% of it is God. I return the first 10% as a reminder that 100% belongs to him. But first fruits are also an amazing promise by God. When the first fruit is given to God, the rest of the harvest is blessed. In other words, if you give God the best, he blesses the rest. Listen to this. Solomon wrote, honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase. So your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will overflow with new wine. God makes a promise that if you give to him first, he will make sure to bless the rest of the harvest. Now, a lot of us maybe have never experienced this idea of having barns filled with plenty, because we've really never honored God with our substance. If we give him the first and the best, we have no reason to doubt he won't bless the rest. And here's what you need to remember. God is a creator, not a consumer. That's why when you give to God, he blesses and multiplies it because he doesn't need it for himself. This is about honoring him so that he in turn honors you. Here's a third truth about first fruits. They are a statement of faith in God. Listen to the prophet Ezekiel. The best of all first fruits of any kind, and every sacrifice of any kind from all your sacrifices shall be the priest. Also, you shall give to the priest the first of your ground meal to cause a blessing to rest on your house. Now, to give to God first requires faith. It requires trust. It requires believing that there's more harvest to come. When I give to God first before I do anything else, I'm trusting that God is going to provide for me tomorrow and next week and throughout this year. And by the way, for those of you who've been listening to this sermon, you think, well, Pastor Keith, this is just all Old Testament stuff. I'm a New Testament kind of person. This stuff doesn't even apply to me. Well, you don't get off the hook that easily, and you certainly can't do that intellectual dodge with Jesus. Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount was teaching about worrying about having enough, worrying about what tomorrow holds. And what he does is he takes his disciples back to this principle of first fruits. This is a passage we looked at last week. But more than anything else, put God's work first and do what he wants, then the other things will be yours as well. He says to his disciples, if you put God first, if he consistently gets the first and best of your life, the Father takes care of the rest. That's first fruits living, and Jesus taught that. So my application is fairly simple and straightforward. Are we giving God first fruits or leftovers? Now, the law of first fruits dictates this, that whatever is done with the first determines what happens with the rest. Again, the promises say, if I bless God, if I give to God first, he blesses the rest of the harvest. If I don't, other things happen as well. Now, we began this message talking about winning, about coming in first, about what's most important to us. And I told you what I did with my first ever paycheck. I wasted it. I wasted it and spent it totally on me. And that's always the temptation that to do with first fruits. That is, we want to take the first fruits for ourselves because we say, I worked hard for this. This is my first benefit. That my first paycheck, I want to blow totally on myself because I have earned this. What's the big deal? Now, those of you who grew up in church, remember this Old Testament story of the destruction of Jericho. You remember this battle. The people of God are told to march around the city 7 times. On the 7th day, they all blow this horn, and the walls come tumbling down. Well, the Bible uses some very explicit language about the city of Jericho. The Bible says that this city was devoted to destruction. That word devoted is actually a worship word. It's to be set apart completely to God. Now, God tells his people, don't touch or take anything in the city. Instead, it has to be burned with fire. Why? Because the spoils of Jericho were not theirs to keep. This was the first city they conquered in Canaan. And because it's the first, it belongs totally and exclusively to God. That's the law of first things. Now, the wealth of Jericho was amazing. We're told that there were bars of gold and stacks of shekels of silver that were actually stacked outside of people's home because they planned on grabbing those things as they fled the city to take their wealth with them. The army was told to burn the entire city and take all the gold and silver for the temple, but none of the wealth of Jericho was for the soldiers. Now, this is uncommon because typically in battle, in war, a soldier, the way they get paid is through the spoils of war. For many, this is the only paycheck they're going to get, but not this time. Why? Because this city is devoted to destruction. This city is the first city. This city and its spoils belong to God. But do you remember what happened? There was a man named Achan who was tempted and grabbed some of that gold for himself, went to his tent, dug a little hole, hid it under his sleeping bed. And of course, he was found out. They suffered a defeat in battle, as well as Achan and his family paid dearly. They violated the principle of first things. And when we violate that principle, we're tempted to grab what we can for ourselves. Now, this is another one of those statements that may be kind of hard to hear, but I still know it's true. The order of that which is given to him clearly defines his place in your life. Does God get the first and the best, Or does God get the last and the least? I mean, be honest about that. We say, God, you're number one, you're more important than anything else. Do our words and do our actions actually line up on that? Friends, God is not poor. God owns everything. When you give to God, you're not helping him out of a jam. In fact, the psalmist reminds us of this. I have no need, this is God speaking. I have no need of a bull from your stall or goats from your pens, for every animal of the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. God is a creator. He's not a consumer. That's why when you give to him, he blesses it, he multiplies it. If I honor him, he honors me. This is not about money any more than the Old Testament was about sheep. It's about lordship. It's about who's number one, who really gets first place. So what does your giving say about what is your ultimate priority in life? As we wrap up, let me share with you the testimony of those who've discovered God's faithfulness. First, this amazing promise from Proverbs. It is possible to give away and become richer. It's also possible to hold on too tightly and lose everything. Yes, the liberal man or the generous man will be rich. By watering others, he waters himself. Now, there are all kinds of people who have put God to the test when it comes to giving, making God their number one priority. And I'll tell you, I want to share with you a list that's a highly unusual list of people. And I want to begin with somebody by the name of Susie Orman. You probably recognize her name because I quoted her last week. Susie Orman is a New York Times bestselling author, a financial guru, has been on countless shows, maintains a radio program, all this kind of stuff. And she talks about generosity. And in her book, Courage to be Rich, she said this: we in this land of prosperity ought to give away at least 10% of our earnings. 10% is our obligation. After 10%, we start being charitable. Friends, this is a secular researcher advocating tithing. But she adds this that speaks to the idea of first fruits. Listen to this. Our first check written at the first of the month should be a check for charity, especially if you're in credit card debt. With this check, we're giving thanks. And when we're thankful, we feel generous. And when we're generous, we feel powerful. And when we're powerful, we attract more money. Friends, Susie Orman is unapologetic in advocating for tithing. Why should I, as a spiritual leader, as a pastor, as a shepherd of people, be embarrassed to talk to you about things that are intended to bless your life, especially when I have the promises of God to back them up? There's somebody else that maybe is an unusual source. A couple of guys by the name of John Roger and Peter McWilliams. Years ago, they wrote this phenomenal New York Times bestselling book called Do It. It was a motivational book. It was a good book. They did a follow-up book to that called Wealth 101. Now, I have read everything these guys have ever written. They are secular. As best I can tell from what they've written, they're not even remotely Christian. But I want you to hear a quote from Wealth 101. When should you tithe? As the saying goes, pay God first. If you pay your bills every 2 weeks, let the first check be your tithing check. Tithing is a way of showing gratitude for whoever or whatever you feel is responsible for the gift of life. It's paying your rent to live in this world. It's your share of the air you breathe, the color of the trees, the sun in the morning, and the moon at night. It's also the most tangible way of saying thank you. I have more than I need. I mean, you notice in the quote, they're not even quite sure who or what is responsible for the gift of life, but they know you should be grateful, and they know that you should tithe. That this is the way we say, I have more than what I need. So those are two secular resources, both saying the same thing. Pay God first. Because you know what? This principle, even though it is found and commanded in the pages of Scripture, when the world looks at this and they said, you practice this, it actually works. Now, I have heard people over the years say, you really can't do this in the real world. I live in the real world. And if you pay God first, you'll just be eaten alive. Let me tell you a story of some people who didn't buy into that lie. You've probably heard the name R.G. Letourneau. He designed and manufactured heavy earth-moving equipment. Back years ago when we had Discovery Channel, they had this show that was called Modern Marvels, and there was an episode devoted exclusively to telling the story of R.G. Letourneau. If you've ever been to Longview, Texas, you know there's a university in his name, and there's a branch of that university over here in Richardson, Texas. Letourneau believed that his partner was God in business. Listen to his words. I believe that God wants businessmen as well as preachers to be his servants. I believe that a factory can be dedicated to his service as well as a church. So Letourneau decided to make God his business partner, and things started to really change and bless in his company. In the first 15 years, he established a foundation that gave $2.5 million to organizations that were involved in Christian work, and he kept $2.25 million for his own evangelistic ministries through his company. And get this, in 1935, Letourneau signed over irrevocably 90% of the company's profits to go to Letourneau Foundation, which is described as a nonprofit corporation whose income and capital can only be used for the cause of Christ. Letourneau discovered it works in the real world. There's another story from the early part of the 20th century. A young man moved to Chicago to build his business and make his fortune. He only had a few years of experience with dairy products, but he was determined to take his theories about cheese making and build a business around it. He started out with $65 in his pocket, a cart, and a rented horse named Patty. He worked hard and tried to sell his cheese on the streets of Chicago. By the end of the first year, he was deeply in debt, and no one would let him borrow any more money. One day in desperation, he loaded up his cart with as much cheese as he could possibly carry, determined to sell $100 worth of cheese, and he only on that day sold $12.65 worth of cheese. He felt defeated, he felt depressed, he was beaten down. He looked at his horse Patty and he said, "What's the matter with us anyhow?" And he said that Patty laid its ears back, and in that moment, out of the air, he seemed to hear the answer, "You are working without God." He actually looked around to see if someone had said that, if someone was hiding behind the horse, if somebody in the crowd had heard what he said. And he said, "It was then that I realized I left God out of my business. And right then and there, I decided to make God my business partner." The man who made that decision is a man named J.L. Kraft, the founder of the Kraft Cheese Company. Today, his name is known around the world, and he's a major employer in our city. He started tithing to God when he was just making $20 a week. By the time he died, he was giving a third of his income to the cause of Christ. Kraft said this, "The only investment I ever made which paid consistently increasing dividends is the money I have given to the Lord." You've heard the name J.D. Rockefeller. He was the Bill Gates of my parents' and grandparents' generation. He once said, "I never would have been able to tithe the first $1 million the first $1 million I ever made if I'd not tithed my first salary, which was $1.50 a week." Or how about William Colgate? He was the founder of Colgate-Palmolive, which is a global household and consumer product corporation. God bless William Colgate so much that he bumped his giving from 10% to 20%. By the time he reached middle age, he was giving half of his income to God. After his children were grown and educated, Colgate gave 100% of his salary back to God. You've heard the name Mr. Welch of Welch's grape juice fame. He's always been a huge supporter of Christian missions around the world. For those of you who don't know, as a young man, he wanted to be a missionary to Africa. He was chosen to go. He and his wife went, and he discovered quickly after that his wife could not bear up under the harsh climate of Africa, so they had to return home heartbroken. But Welch was determined to make as much money he could to start spreading the gospel around the world. His dad was a dentist who started to make an unfermented wine for communion. This young man, Mr. Welch, he took over the family business, and the rest is history. Welch, in his lifetime, gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to mission. One last story happened in Michigan. A broken man at the end of his rope, suicidal. Here's what he wrote. "One night at the age of 56, I was broken, discouraged, and in a sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan. I felt I would never see the dawn of another day. I got up and I wrote farewell letters to my wife and my oldest son. I sealed the letters. If I did sleep, it was not sound. I rose early, went down the floor, found the dining room open. Suddenly, over in the corner, I heard singing of an old Christian song, 'God will take care of you.' My heart was so heavy when I walked into that room. But after I heard that song, I came out of that room a changed man. Within a few moments, my life was transformed. It was as if I'd had a new birth. God did take care of me. He saved me. And I've been trying to serve him ever since. When I finally got back on my feet, I enjoyed more materially than I ever had before. I gained immeasurably in spiritual wealth, for I'd learned to turn to God for guidance in every act and decision of my life. Signed, James Cash Penny, J.C. Penny. Don't tell me it doesn't work in the real world. Some of the best known household names today are because someone dared to believe God more than they believed their fears, and they put God to the test. Now, I've taken you on a little journey in the last part of this message through the aisles of the grocery store to hear the story about products or behind products that have become household names. I've taken you to the mall to see the story behind the retail giant J.C. Penney. I told you the story of a man who'll be remembered as one of the richest men to ever live, a businessman whose construction company funded a university and helped to fund missionary endeavors for years, and men and women outside the church who, regardless of what they believed about theology or the things of God, advocating tithing because it works. Here's what I know. Whatever you want God to bless, you better put him first place in. If you want God to bless your family, put him first place in your family. If you want God to bless a dating relationship, your marriage, put him front and center, the first thing in that marriage. And if you want God to bless your finances, put him first financially. Now, frequently in church, you'll hear somebody say, when it comes to my priorities, I serve God first, my family second, my church third, and so on and so forth. And it sounds right, and it sounds so spiritual. And for years, I never even questioned it until I started to think, how do you apply that? First, I got to tell you, that hierarchy doesn't help me. And I got to tell you why it doesn't help me. If God's my top priority and family is second, why do I spend more time and energy at work than I do on both of them combined? But even more importantly, if you have a list, God shouldn't be at the top of that list. God shouldn't even be on that list, because God's not just another check item on your to-do list. Oh, I went to church Sunday, got my God stuff done for the week. He's the God of all life. We're not to seek him first, and then our family, and then our business, and our career, and our money. We're to seek God first in our family, and in our business career, and in with my money. In every area of my life, I'm to seek God first. We're not to serve God first, our family second, ourselves last. We're to serve God as we serve our family, as we serve our church, as we work in our community, and even as we serve our own needs. God's not the top priority of my life. God is life to the believer. Now, a few years ago, I discovered a different way to talk about my Christian priorities. The Bible doesn't say put Jesus at the top of the list. It says keep him at the center of everything. So when he's at the center of my life, think of every other aspect of my life as the spokes of the wheel. Here's family, here's career, here's finances, here's entertainment, here's all the stuff I do with my life, and Christ is the center. If you place Christ at the center of your life, he's always first place. He'll be at the center of every decision, so much so that you live your life in reliance on Christ in regards to every aspect of your life as it finds expression. In other words, we don't live our life from the top down. We live our Christian life from the inside out. So my question as we wrap up today is simply this: is Christ at the center of your life? Is it the center of your work life? Is it the center of your family life, your dating relationship? Is Christ the center of your financial life? Does he get first place? That's what it means to give him the first and the best, to keep him at the center, to keep our life oriented around him. And whatever it is my hands are doing, whatever it is I'm engaged in with my resources, my time, my energy, my money, that first and foremost, it flows through Jesus before it goes anyplace else. Is he first place? Is he at the center? Let's pray. Father, I come to you right now just totally aware that this is your time and these are your people. And my responsibility first and foremost is to share with them your truth. And I pray, God, that truth finds a home in every heart. That, Lord, we would take the time in this moment to get brass tacks honest about where we really are. Not what we say, but how we live. And how we live and what our behaviors say about what's most important. And Lord, if that is anything else but you, then God, I pray that through your grace and your strength, through the courage that you flow into our life by your promises, that you will help us to put you at the center of all things so that we can plan our life and we can live our life the way it was intended. Because there is something right now at the center. That may be you, it may not be you. So Lord, may you be at the center of our life. May you be at the center of this church. And may you be at the center of my life. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. As always, we are so delighted that you could be with us. Please, if you like this message, if you connect to it, you learned something today that's helpful to you in your spiritual life, it might help somebody else, so share it with others. Feel free to comment. We always love to interact with everybody who joins us online, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. Please be with us next week. Next week, I'm beginning a new 3-part series called The Age of Rage, where we're going to talk about society and anger and our own personal battles with anger. You do not want to miss this series. We're going to take a few moments now and talk about how we might apply this message in our life. So please join us for the discussion. And as always, join us in the comments. God bless you and have a great week.